The Boeing 757 should have been long gone by now. A 40-year-old jet out of production for 2 decades, a fuel-hungry relic from another era. American Airlines used the pandemic to accelerate its retirement. United sent some of theirs to the desert. The industry decided the 757 had no place in passenger service. But Delta, it didn't just keep theirs, it has maintained them. Today, Delta operates 96 Boeing 757s, more than any airline in the world. On paper, this makes no sense. Higher fuel burn, costly maintenance, a design that basically predates the internet. Yet somehow, Delta transformed the 757 from an aging liability into a competitive weapon. So, how did Delta turn a forgotten airliner into one of the smartest strategic assets in the sky? And what does this reveal about how airlines win or lose in 2025? To understand Delta's strategy, we need to go back to 1983 when the 757 entered service. The 757 was designed as the 727's replacement, a narrow-body aircraft with near wide-body performance. It could haul around 200 to 240 passengers across the Atlantic, climb out of scorching hot airports, and land on runways that bigger jets couldn't touch. Boeing called it the middle-of-the-market solution, more capable than a 737, more efficient than a 767. Airlines couldn't get enough. It became known as the pocket rocket, or flying pencil. Between 1982 and 2004, Boeing built 150,757, including freighters. They were everywhere. American used them for coast-to-coast flights, United flew them to Europe, charter airlines loved them for Caribbean routes. But here's where things get interesting. Of those aircraft built, around 500 are still active in passenger and cargo service today. The rest packed in desert boneyards or scrapped entirely. What happened to aviation's standout performer? 3 factors destroyed the 757's reputation among most airlines. First, operating costs became unsustainable as the fleet aged. Fuel and maintenance expenses ran 20 to 30% higher compared to modern aircraft like the Boeing 737 MAX or Airbus A321neo. The 757's engines, originally designed in the early 1980s, became fuel-hungry relics. Second, Boeing stopped building them in 2004 and never created a direct replacement. Boeing assumed airlines would just split the 757's missions between the 737s and 767s. But that left massive gaps, routes too long for a 737, but not big enough for a wide-body. Third, newer narrow bodies started eating into the 757's territory. The Airbus A321neo could handle many domestic routes with better fuel economy. American Airlines retired its entire fleet in 2020, eliminating what executives called unnecessary costs. United similarly phased out a fair few of its 757s in 2020, focusing instead on 737 MAXs for domestic routes and 787s for longer missions. The industry consensus was clear: the 757's time was over. But while everyone was running for the exits, Delta was doing something completely different. They were doubling down. Now, some 757s came from their 2008 Northwest merger. But Delta also strategically acquired more as other airlines abandoned them. It was not just flying old planes with old interiors either. Delta invested millions in ripping out outdated cabins and installing modern seats, updated entertainment systems, and premium sections that rival much newer aircraft. But here's what nobody expected. Delta's strategy, it isn't about being cheap or nostalgic. It's about exploiting 3 specific weaknesses in competitors' networks. And these weaknesses, they're about to reveal why Delta's illogical decision is actually genius. It's a 100-degree summer day at Mexico City International Airport. The thin air at 7,000 feet elevation creates challenging conditions for aircraft performance. Most narrow bodies struggle to take off fully loaded in these conditions. But the 757's overpowered engines overcome these challenging conditions with ease. Delta flies multiple daily 757 services to destinations that would require weight restrictions on smaller aircraft. The A321neo can technically handle these routes, but with compromises that hurt profits. The 757 does it without breaking a sweat. While competitors struggle with performance limitations, Delta serves these challenging destinations with full passenger loads and cargo capacity. Some premium airports were designed for smaller aircraft, but they're exactly where Delta wants to offer larger planes and more seats. The 757's combination of powerful engines means it operates safely from some constrained airports with full passenger loads. Try that with a 737 or an A330, and you're looking at significant weight restrictions, or simply can't operate the route at all. Delta's modernized cabins with updated entertainment appeal to passengers on routes where alternatives don't exist. Delta is literally saving airports where competitors have to compromise, capturing premium business travel markets with limited competition. But the 757's key advantage? That's something most people never think about. Transatlantic thin routes. As of August 2025, Delta operates just two 757 transatlantic seasonal routes. Detroit to Kelvic 5 times per week and Minneapolis to Kelvic daily. But the historical scope tells a bigger story. Before the pandemic, Delta operated a lot of different 757 routes to Europe, JFK to Shannon, JFK to Lisbon, and others that competitors couldn't serve economically with larger aircraft. The 757's 3,900 nautical mile range means Delta can operate non-stop services on routes where competitors force passengers to connect through major hubs. The 22 business class configuration and roomier 33 economy layout provide a comfort edge on these longer flights. Even with payload restrictions on some longer European flights before the pandemic, Delta maintained profitability where others couldn't make the economics work. This is where Delta's seemingly crazy strategy reveals its genius. Now it gets even better. Those 96 Boeing 757s in Delta's fleet, 875,000, 720,000, and 16 757s 300, zero debt service. They're completely paid off. The biggest expense for most airlines, aircraft financing costs, well, they don't exist for Delta's 757 operations. Compare that reality to buying new aircraft. At list prices, an Airbus A321neo costs about $130 million. To replace its 757 fleet, Delta would need a multi-billion-dollar investment. Even with lower operating costs, the payback period would stretch decades. The 757's cost per flight hour is approximately 15 to 20% higher than the A321neo. That's a cost gap Delta must overcome. But here's where the magic happens. Zero financing costs and high load factors on niche routes generate more daily revenue per flight than competitors' alternatives can achieve on alternative routings. Delta made strategic investments to keep the 757 flying efficiently. The result? Its 757s continue to be reliable. Delta's philosophy cuts against industry wisdom. Keep aircraft flying as long as they're profitable, regardless of what people say about having the newest fleet. They have done the same with their huge 717 fleet. We made an entire video about this. But wait, couldn't Delta just buy modern replacements like everyone else? Here's where the plot thickens. The A321neo has similar passenger capacity and decent range, but its engines struggle in hot and high environments. It also can't handle the short runway situations where Delta deploys 757s for maximum competitive advantage. Boeing's 737 MAX family doesn't even come close. The largest variant, the MAX 10, has similar capacity, but significantly less range and power for challenging airport conditions. Boeing actually recognized this gap and had reportedly attempted to develop the new midsize airplane, the NMA, sometimes called the 797. It would have been the perfect 757 replacement with similar capabilities, but with modern efficiency. Then Boeing canceled the entire program to focus on fixing MAX problems. Airbus, they've tried to fill the void with the A321XLR, an extra long-range single aisle that can handle some transatlantic routes. It's close, but but it still doesn't match the 757's hot and high performance or short runway capabilities that Delta exploits for competitive advantage. The aircraft that best fits Delta's network simply doesn't exist in modern form. So the airline is stuck with a 40-year-old design that still does the job better than anything new. How does this strategy compare with their competitors? American Airlines? They took the opposite approach, retiring their entire 757 fleet by 2020 to eliminate rising costs. They replaced them with more A321neos and bet on route optimization through their hub network. American's early 757 retirement led to lost market share on short runway routes, where Delta now faces less competition with its larger 757s. United similarly ditched most of its 757s, focusing on the 737's MAXs for domestic routes and 787's Dreamliners for longer missions. United's reliance on this strategy forced connections on thin transatlantic routes that Delta serves directly, boosting Delta's revenue on these markets. Both strategies make perfect sense if you have a different network structure than Delta. American and United built hub and spoke systems that efficiently channel passengers through major connection points, reducing the need for point-to-point service on marginal routes. But Delta's network, particularly on the East Coast that benefits from more direct routing, those thin routes that competitors abandoned, Delta serves them profitably with 757s, while others force passengers to make connections through crowded hub airports. The competitive result, Delta captures passengers who value nonstop service and charges premium prices for routes where it faces limited competition. This isn't Delta's first contrarian fleet decision. They've long been the longest operator of MD-88, MD-90, and Boeing 717S, keeping the DC-9 family flying long after other airlines retired them. The airline's approach is ruthlessly pragmatic. If an airline type serves the network efficiently and profitably, keep flying it regardless of age or industry trends. Delta isn't interested in having the newest fleet for bragging rights if older aircraft deliver better financial results. This creates sustainable competitive advantages. While American and United bet everything on A321neos and 737 MAXs for efficiency, Delta leverages the 757's unique capabilities to serve routes the airline's competitors simply cannot match economically. But let's be real, Delta's 757 strategy faces mounting challenges. As aircraft age beyond their original design life, maintenance becomes exponentially more complex and expensive. Part scarcity becomes a serious issue when you're operating aircraft that went out of production 2 decades ago. Aircraft on ground situations where planes are stuck at airport due to mechanical failures become more frequent with aging fleets. This cascades into schedule disruptions and operational costs that can quickly spiral out of control. Then older aircraft face increasingly strict emissions and noise regulations that could threaten Delta's strategy. The 757's engines, designed in the 1970s, don't meet the latest environmental standards that newer aircraft achieve effortlessly. Some airports, they've started implementing noise restrictions that limit when 757s can operate. European airports are particularly aggressive about this. EU's Corsia and sustainable aviation fuel mandates. They could increase 757 operating costs, eroding Delta's cost advantage if fuel prices spike. But the bigger risk is economic. If fuel prices spike dramatically or environmental regulations tighten faster than expected, the 757's operating cost disadvantage could overwhelm its unique capability advantages, making the entire fleet financially unviable overnight. Now, what is the future for their 757 fleet? Delta isn't planning to fly 757s forever despite their current success. The gradual replacement strategy centers on A321neos for most routes. Delta plans to phase out 757s by the end of this decade, replacing them with A321neos. The A321neos range covers some of the former 757 transatlantic routes, but falls short on hot and high performance. Boeing's canceled 797 leaves Delta with no perfect replacement, potentially exposing network gaps by the 2030s. The A321XLR variant comes closest to matching the 757's transatlantic capabilities while offering significantly better fuel efficiency. So, let me leave you with this. What appears to be a stubborn attachment to outdated aircraft, it's actually a lesson in strategic planning. Delta identified specific operational advantages that newer aircraft couldn't replicate, then systematically doubled down on exploiting those advantages for competitive gain. The airline transformed the 757's age from an apparent liability into a sustainable competitive asset by eliminating financing costs while maintaining superior operational utility. The strategic result, Delta operates profitable routes that competitors can't economically match, serves challenging airports that others avoid entirely, and maintains direct service where rivals force passengers through hub connections. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?